Do you know the name of the village that I grew up in France? In the spring, the leaves filled the trees and the forest came alive. To see it was to feel like you had stepped into a fairy tale. Oh, it was magical. When life is as good as mine was, there is much you do not see. But the world outside grew darker and darker.
Based on R.J. Palacios' graphic novel, Whitebird, A Wonder Story, shows how one act of kindness, even in the darkest of times, can live on for generations. Today, along with characters from Whitebird and others, we'll explore things like courage, resilience, the importance of sharing our stories, and the power of kindness. We'll follow Julian, a boy who's been expelled from his former school for bullying another student in the movie Wonder. Oh, and don't worry, you won't need to have seen Wonder to enjoy Whitebird. Completely different story. To help Julian overcome challenges he's facing, his grandmother Sarah Blum reveals her own story of crisis and courage. When she was a schoolgirl, a family risked everything to save her in Nazi-occupied France. Sharing testimonies about our experiences is a powerful way to connect with others. Although the characters in Whitebird are fictional, the story and situations they face are well-grounded historically, portraying events like those that happened to millions of people during the Holocaust.
I'm sure your father has told you stories about what happened to me when I was a young girl.
He says you don't really like to talk about it.
I don't. But now, I think, for your sake, I must.
After France surrenders to the Nazis, young Sarah Blum watches as fear quickly turns most of her neighbors into bystanders, willing to go along with anti-Jewish policies.
Yeah, thank you. Just take it and go. It said no Jews. You said that wouldn't happen here.
I'm afraid I was wrong.
German soldiers suddenly round up all the Jewish inhabitants, leaving Sarah on her own with nowhere to go. She must find the courage to persevere. What comes to mind when you think of a word like courage? Dashing into a burning building to save someone? Being an ally? Or just standing up for local causes in your community?
Courage to me is doing something that you're afraid to do, even though you're afraid to do it. So what is courageous for one person might not be courageous for another person because they're afraid of different things.
Courage to me means determination and strength. It can be physical, such as facing a huge fear, or just simply recognizing a mistake.
Know what's interesting about courage? It requires action. We can't just stand by and watch in silent disapproval. It's only courageous if we choose to get involved. We call that being an upstander. We'll talk more about what that means in a bit. Let's also talk for a minute about what courage isn't. Courage doesn't mean the absence of fear, far from it. Courage is about doing the right thing in spite of being afraid, whether you're the person in need or the person helping someone who is.
Sarah, you need to come with me right now. I know a way out.
We had in common one crucial thing. We had both seen how much hate people are capable of, and how much courage it took to be kind. Because when kindness can cost you your life, it becomes like a miracle.
Acting selflessly to help others despite potential risks to yourself, that's the very definition of being an upstander. And it can feel a lot different from the way many of us go through the world.
If I learned anything from back then, it's to just mind my own business. Don't be mean, don't be nice, just be normal.
And this is what you've learned? To be normal?
What's wrong with normal?
Nothing. And everything.
Of course, acts of courage don't have to blow up the internet to be considered brave. There are small ways to be courageous too, like trying a new experience outside of your comfort zone, standing up for someone who's being picked on, taking a stand against an unfair practice or policy, or just accepting your own identity and embracing who you are. In extremely dire circumstances, like we see in Whitebird, simply surviving may be the ultimate act of courage, as Sarah does in the movie, and as real-life survivors like Aaron Elster did so courageously during the Holocaust.
I remember my mother waking me up and telling me to get dressed in a hurry. We had to go in a hiding place.
Before the war, Aaron Elster and his family lived peacefully with their neighbors in Poland. Aaron went to school, played with friends from different faiths. In spite of hardships caused by war, he was happy. But when he was 10 years old, soldiers forced his family from their home into a walled ghetto. The life he'd always known was ripped away in an instant. Realizing they would soon be taken to a concentration camp, Aaron hid with his family, terrified they'd be discovered.
Pretty soon we were found out anyway, and we were all herded out into the street against the building. My mind was full of fear, hate, questioning. What did I do to deserve this?
Fortunately, Aaron escaped, but the rest of his family was taken to Treblinka, a concentration camp near his village in Poland. He never saw them again. Eventually, he was hidden in a reluctant farmer's attic with little more than a tin roof to protect him from the elements.
The attic was my safety. That was the safest place I could possibly be. If I would go outside, I couldn't possibly survive. I didn't want to die. I just didn't want to die. I was extremely cold. I always felt that my fingers and toes were freezing. And the hunger was so deep that I would have done anything for any kind of food.
In 1944, retreating German soldiers seized the building where Aaron was hiding and lived directly below him for several months. One day, a soldier wandered into the attic and would have discovered Aaron if the woman hiding him hadn't distracted the soldier just in time. Aaron's situation wasn't unique. Those in hiding, as well as anyone trying to help them, were in constant danger.
You know what happens if they find you here? Do you? They'll arrest my parents. They'll execute them, do you understand?
These hiding places and the courage and kindness that made it possible for endangered people to use them were like tiny islands of hope for those who had lost all hope. That's why one Holocaust specialist in Poland is documenting these amazing spaces and helping to preserve them. These hiding places provide an architectural testimony or record of what happened during this dark time in human history.
My name is Natalia Romik. I spent all my life in Poland. I am an architect, artist, and historian. We know that during the Second World War, over 50,000 Polish Jews survived in the so-called Aryan sites, but we know very little about the hiding places themselves. Since the end of the Second World War, nobody was taking care of the hiding places. And for me, they possess the story, possess the aura of the people who are not only hid there, but also how the hiding places were constructed. We are now in Poland, in Warsaw, in a Jewish cemetery in Okopowa Street, and behind my back is a grave, shelter, hiding place, used and built by back then young, 14 years old Abraham Karmi. When I met Abraham Karmi in Israel, mostly he said I was helping bringing bricks to the shelter. And his family used to live in the cemetery, so he was quite aware about this area. The cemetery was very different back then in a 42, 43 because there were no trees. Mostly the hiding places, they were built during the night. We should imagine that people during the night, they sometimes have only spoon, sometimes only knives. Being scared not only from the Germans, but also your neighbors as they are watching you. It's very emotional for me to go into the hiding places inside the grave, but I also try to not think about it. So the whole project is about the architecture, about the physical scale of the hiding places. So here we are in Abraham Karmi hiding place. As you can see, this is like a small bunker. It's built from the bricks. And here, to the right, there are 3 steps, 3 stairs. We are not really sure right now, but probably that was the entry point to the hiding place. Not in the way how we were like going inside from the ceiling. When I was asking Abraham Karmi, like how you covered during the night, he said, we cover ourselves during the night with Mrs. Rosenberg. Because of the one of the Jewish tombstones was written Mrs. Rosenberg. It will be very hard to know what was the light inside the grave. If they were hungry, probably they were. And Abraham was not really talkative in this matter. He said, like, Natalia, I cannot tell you what was our daily routine, because it's very traumatic. It's not easy to tell how long Jewish people spent in a hiding places. Sometimes maybe that was a night, sometimes that was maybe a month or the years. But it's also very hard to imagine how the situation in a grave was during the winter. There are like a few mysterious elements in this hiding place. For example, one pipe that was maybe a pipe with a water, maybe with oxygen, but probably they also put like a pipe and they like roll the matzevot. So to have this kind of mobile and artificial ceilings made from the Jewish tombstones. Abraham Karmi was a kid, more teenager. He was 14, and he was helping his uncle, bringing bricks, preparing the structure of the hiding place. He was with his mom, his uncle, and also with the member of the family. But they were shot. They were shot nearby the hiding place. So we spent actually a few weeks inside the grave, and we made a cast of the 2 walls of the hiding place because it's a brick shelter. So we had the cast as an art piece, and we had like a beautiful tables where we apply everything what we found inside the grave. I have uncovered more than 9 hiding places, and there are more and more. Memory is very important for us, especially I think in the school and in public education, like this story. For me, it's like never again war, never again living in a hiding. We need a testimony, and I believe the architecture is also speaking themselves.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, good. In this project, I have a pleasure to work with Aleksandra Janus, an anthropologist and historian.
I think what's fascinating is his story after he escaped the cemetery. He was with his uncle first, they escaped together, and then he lost his uncle, and he was all alone, and he ended up in this forced labor camp. And when he lost all hope, a guy appeared who brought him from Warsaw jewelry of his mother that was hidden in the cemetery. And with the jewelry, he buys himself something warm, and he survives the war. And I think this is an unbelievable story, but also like teaches us a lesson, right? And that when you lose all the hope, that there's always hope even in a hopeless place.
In the heat of the moment, we can't predict how important our acts of courage may be, but their effects can ripple outward, touching far more lives than we ever imagined.
There are no rational explanations for miracles. But here we are. Still, the question remains, why? Why us?
My name is Beth Lane. I'm the director, producer, and writer of a feature documentary film about 7 siblings who were hidden for 2 years outside of Berlin during World War II. My mother is the youngest of those 7 siblings. When her mother was arrested and deported to Auschwitz, she was 3 years old. They're the only family of 7 siblings known to have survived together and emigrated together. The film is my journey of going to all the places where they were either hidden or aided by benevolent strangers who helped them not only survive, but eventually emigrate to America together. And he picked them up here at the hospital in the middle of the night. My family was hidden by 2 Christian farmers who lived 60 kilometers outside of Berlin. Arthur and Paula Schmidt, hands down, are the heroes of this story. And they are the epitome of what it means to actually be an upstander. People who put their lives at risk in order to hide and save 7 human beings. At their farmland, my mother and her siblings were hidden in a laundry shed. And yet they were also kind of hidden in plain sight. The entire town eventually knew that the kids were hiding there. That not one person in the town of Voreen turned them in is extraordinary. That alone was an act of courage and bravery. There are so many different people that helped them survive. I wish I could name them all. The one thing that I learned that I had no idea about was how resilient they were. It's kind of extraordinary that 7 kids who did not have the education that other kids had because it was against the law for them to go to school, they figured it out. The kindness of Arthur and Paula Schmidt was the portal into which the children had the courage to continue to move on.
First, we have Alphonse. Alphonse has a son.
I didn't realize at the beginning what a gift it was going to be to so many other family members to actually have some clarity about our history.
This is our whole family.
Because of Arthur and Paula Schmidt, who literally saved 7 children, because of that act, our family has mushroomed into at least 72 people.
That's unbelievable. I mean, you save 7 people and you save 72 lives.
Come here, sis. Give me a hug.
I am really proud of myself for having the courage to do it. I never thought it was my story to tell. I always thought it was hers. The film that I've created is an opportunity for anyone who is open to practice the muscle of empathy and compassion for other human beings.
If this were to happen again, would you hide me?
It's a hard question. I would like to say yes, and I hope that I would make that decision in the moment, but you never know.
Would you hide me? It is a confrontational question. Of course I'd like to hide you. I hope I would never have to hide you. Why should anyone ever have to hide from another human being?
You're the bravest person I've ever met. The truth is, had you been the one that needed saving, I probably wouldn't have done it. You don't know that? No, I do. And I'm sorry.
Education about the Holocaust is critical to understand these cautionary tales so that we don't repeat history. The museums that we have in this country give people an opportunity to relate to something that happened in our history, but make it feel much more present day. I think being an upstander does take bravery, it does take courage. Upstanders aren't necessarily the people that are accusing other people of doing wrong. Upstanders are people that say, I don't feel good about this. I would like to see a change. Tiny little acts of kindness change the world.
Kindness can ripple outwards by putting a smile on somebody's face and making them want to allow others to enjoy the experience of receiving kindness.
You never know, it may be there can be this one person that you hardly know that's having a down day, and you go check on them, and they could remember that day for the rest of their life.
You guys have a lot of strength and power in storytelling. You can shoot on your phones, you can edit on your computers, you can write, you can create music. Give yourself the gift of sharing something that comes from no one else but you.
Tell me a story. It's one of the first things we learn to ask for as children. Why is that? Why do we gather together and watch movies like Whitebird? Humans are social beings. We crave connection. Stories and testimonies help us to connect, to imagine a better world, to inspire ourselves and others to change, to remember how powerful kindness can be.
You forget many things in life, but you never forget kindness. Like love, it stays with you forever.
Sharing our stories and testimonies is one of the most powerful ways to reach across cultures, generations, and backgrounds to build a sense for mutual care for one another.
When in dark times, those small things remind us of our humanity.
If we pay attention, we'll notice small ways to show kindness all the time. Like being more purposeful with the words we use to avoid discriminating against others inadvertently, or just listening and being present for others. Let's learn to unlock some of our innate human superpowers, like kindness, empathy, and courage, to become the upstanders we want to be. Remember, not everything needs to be about saving the world. Small things matter, and there are many ways to practice courage or show compassion, like standing up against anti-Semitism and other forms of racism or prejudice, getting involved with a cause as a volunteer, or opening our homes or neighborhoods to those who need help. Even inviting others over to share family or cultural traditions or food can build understanding and empathy, making life in our communities richer and stronger.
Sometimes the smallest gestures can lead to the greatest change.
Whitebird is such an awesome story. It reminds us of things we already know but so easily forget. That showing kindness and courage, sharing our experiences and stories, and just being there for each other is what it's all about.
And do you understand why I needed to tell you this story now, Julian?
And that's a wrap for our Whitebird virtual field trip. Thank you so much for joining us. We'd like to express our gratitude to Natalia Romick and Beth Lane for sharing their projects and insights. And we especially appreciate the Eyewitness program for making Aaron Elster's powerful testimony available. What final thoughts do you have before we go? What does love and kindness look like to you?
You'll never succeed in life if you're not kind. No one will ever want to be a friend, and you'll just be lonely being rude. It's important to accept everyone, because deep down we're all human.
It's important to accept others because we all live on this planet together. We all have to, we have to interact in some way, shape, or form. And everything's just more pleasant for everybody if we all accept each other.
Great stuff. Let's use our new skills to make a new normal.
Hatred is not normal. Cruelty is not normal.
My bad.
Love is normal. Kindness is normal. But simply knowing this is not enough. It must be shared. It must be practiced.